what I'm told. to do,
Bill, can you hear
somebody
us?
Thinks I should do.
I hear you. I hear you. People can be very single-minded, especially on party politics.
Yes, ma'am.
Bill, can you hear us? Or anybody on Zoom?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks. We just got to get something set up with the screen real quick. Just want to make sure we're good.
Dress down too.
Are you here for me?
That's okay. We can make it real quick.
Yeah,
Fast.
it might. She said the strictly only suggestion, just stuff she wrote.
Okay, so we have 4 counselors, Bill, we have everybody. That's gonna
Did
be-
Jeff able to call in from California?
I don't think, I assume no. I told him, he said he would if he was able to, but we're recording it, so. Okay. Is he? No?
You're on vacation.
Don't like you back to the door yet. Huh? Don't like you back to the door. This is an 8. That's why I didn't sit there. Well, no, I just wanted to see people. I mean, my right shoulder.
All right, we're here to conduct a workshop for the solar farms ordinance that we currently have drafted by the planning board. There's a moratorium for this in place until September 23rd-ish, I think. Don't quote me on that. We have Hershey, Greg, Burnell, and Bill Cole from the planning board present, and we have John, Jessica, Mallory, and Jack from the council present. So I know that we wanted to just discuss a few different things, but I think it'd be helpful from the planning board's perspective to kind of like, for us to kind of hear how we landed where we're at. And I know that there was maybe some confusion around timing and stuff.
Sure. I'll speak.
Go for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, when we last discussed this, it was really very much an unfinished ordinance from our perspective. We were advised at the beginning of the planning board meeting when this was an agenda topic, that this tonight would conclude our conversation on this and that we're done. and that we're to turn it into the town council. So
Sorry, I'm just gonna pause.
we'll pause and wait for that to.
No, I just want to make sure they can hear you. Bill, are you able to hear Greg? You're on mute, Bill.
Rookie mistake. Yeah, I can hear him. It's a little bit quiet, but I can hear him.
We can't hear you. Hold on, we gotta turn up the volume. Okay, try now.
Yep. I could hear him.
Is everybody good? Okay.
So I would say from the planning board's perspective, we were, probably 3/4 of the way through what I would consider to be our review of the ordinance. There were a lot of straggling items that we had yet to really address on it. But we were told to wrap up our work and we're done with it and to turn it in. So it was kind of abruptly taken from us. But there were really, from our perspective, 3 or 4 big straggling items there. One was the bonding, one was the definitions, and the other was how we wanted to address the, whether or not it should be limited in certain areas of town, the table A requirements. Those were a couple big things that we just assumed you wanted it back, we took it, and you were gonna handle it. Happy to have those conversations. I can't speak for the whole board, but we're happy to take it back if you want us to review it further. We just taken and we assumed you wanted it, and for some reason unknown to us. So we're happy to do it. So one of the things I know is gonna be the question right here is the setback requirement. In some of our conversation that we were having very, preliminary conversations when we were going through it on, gee, it's gonna be hard when we have to figure out where we wanna put them, what zone, that kind of thing. But we said, that's a conversation for another day. We just ourselves kept punting that down the road because we were going through the actual language, et cetera. But our conversation actually developed, and as we got away from the table A approach, we really just started looking at the setback issue in terms of what do the larger issues appear to be with the solar farms, and that's the visual and how people see it. So there was questions, and we went back and forth on minimum requirements in terms of size. Do we want to allow the 5 megawatts? Do we want to make it less than that? So the long story short of that, on the big issue for the setback, going back to some of the past, public hearings and other issues that have come up in the past with the other applications that have been before the planning board, have been issues, of perception and the visual, the buffers, that kind of stuff. So on one hand, that's how we kind of went to, without addressing the table A, is if we put in a significant amount of a buffer, will that effectively, without any addressing it in table A, will the being put into a setback requirement, that will essentially almost become, in our limited view, self-regulating. That's about as far as we got.
Okay.
And then it was taken, and we just made the assumption that we wanted it back, and hey, we were happy to hand it on over and give it back to you folks. So,
Yeah,
but, we're happy to have that conversation tonight in Burnell and Hershey. And I mean, if you have anything you want to add, go right ahead.
No, that sounds about right. I mean, yes, Greg
so
summed it up well.
as far as the sort of like we need you guys to be done with the solar farm ordinance. I don't know exactly what happened with that. Like, I know at some point, I think I had asked to put the solar farm stuff on our agenda more than anything, just to like check in around like, where are we relative to the end of the moratorium? Are we on track and all of that? But I don't know exactly why that happened, but that was not the intention to say like, stop working on it and just give it to us in draft form. And so I think, and I'm speaking for myself, so you guys jump in, but like, I interpreted the sort of like unfinished parts of this as like, as I was saying earlier, you all weren't able to reach some sort of consensus and wanted to lean on us to add whatever.
No, I think we were working right along.
Yeah,
We're doing fine, but that's okay. I mean,
Yeah,
it's good to have more input and,
Yeah.
we'll get a better product out of it, right? So let's
Okay.
just have the chat and see where we go.
Okay,
There was, I'll just reiterate, there was no intent of conversation fully. Because we're looking at the timeline and said, okay, where are we?
Yeah, that's fine.
And actually, in looking at bonding definitions and zoning cases, table A, setbacks, and that's the same list kind of, we have that after our review, so. I think the intent of tonight is to actually pass it back for another draft. And, just, we'll share with you what we are thinking of.
Yeah.
And if I could start.
Yeah, I think, so I just want to be clear, so as it relates to the bonding section or that portion of the ordinance definitions of table A, your intention was to complete that.
Yeah, as far as the bonding goes, we raised a concern on our end that the bonding is beyond our role. What we should be discussing as a board, it really was a legal issue.
Yeah.
There's a whole host of issues associated with bonding in general.
Yeah,
And so I note that the town attorney made some suggestions. And so that's a your call as the council, what you're comfortable with
okay,
in terms of that. I don't really look at that as a land use issue that we would want to have to discuss. That's, it really just to ensure the decommissioning of any type of, solar array that's put up.
yeah,
So I see the attorney commented there, and if that's okay with you, that's okay with us. So again, it gets down to the setback, the definition, which I see he did provide something.
yeah.
I read it a couple times.
These are cameras.
No, here,
We have-
I printed, oh, it's
Which one?
actually-
No, I think I got it. This one?
Here,
We have
yeah,
something
here's
from
what he.
Bill as well.
Or April 12th. I got that.
Well, not the April 12th, these were his comments from June 14th. Here, that was from the town council. So I guess from our perspective, we'd be happy to take it back and take another look at it. The bonding, you got the language from the attorney, we're not gonna touch that as a practical matter. It really comes down to table A, what you want us to do on that one. Or do you want to address it through the setback, kind of an indirect way? People talk about, one of the comments I made at the planning board was, 50 feet or 100 feet. The reality is when you drive by these things, and I drive by a couple on a daily basis, they're right there, And so whether if it's 100 feet, you can still clearly see it. So just based on our general, this would be the set in stone recollection of past conversations, that's where we said maybe the biggest issue is we hit it indirectly by doing a really large buffer. And that will really gear it into the areas that are large enough to hold such an array.
Yeah.
So it's not out at the road.
Also,
But if you want us to lower that and address it in table A, we can do that. too.
but don't forget, no amount of setback will matter if it's in a cape field.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have any buffer. You could ask them to plant a forest in front of it. That doesn't seem very reasonable, right?
So I went through Skowhegan last Wednesday on a trip and counted probably 6 solar fields, and exactly that.
Yep.
They're in the middle of the hayfield. They're a quarter mile off the road, but they're in the middle of the hayfield. So you can see
You're
it.
not gonna-
And
And
then 95's got them in gray, and I went all the way up to Island Falls and Holton last weekend, and went by probably 5 or 6 more.
Yeah.
Depending on where you put them.
We had
You're
that
gonna see
same
it.
conversation.
Right, and philosophically, I think we all agree that solar energy is important, right? It's clean, it's the wave of the future. It should have been 40 years ago, the wave of the future. So we want them. But just like everything else, we don't want 40 of them. And we don't want them to completely obliterate what some parts of our town look like. So it takes some amount of really fine tooth combing through, I think, table A to figure out where they go. And, I don't want to clear cut every forest, but not every forest is valuable. They're all different. Some are really, part of huge ecosystems and watersheds, and some are not, some are just junk. And also we want hay. We have horses, we need hay. We don't want every hayfield converted to solar either. So I think it was really looking at, I hate to say it, I was hoping we would look at a town map and look at parcels that were large enough to accommodate,
We have a list
a
of,
Yeah,
5
we-
mega.
we
great.
asked
it's
for
a
this.
list on a map.
Yeah, we asked for
Okay.
a lot of that.
Let me go down and make this list for you.
Thank you.
What would actually help is what we asked, and we were told it was possible, was to give us a map and have the acreage highlighted that was
Right.
large enough to hold such a facility.
And it's
So it
really-
is, but it all depends on what your setbacks are on.
Right.
On what it is,
Yeah.
right? We figured that out in the meeting the other night. If you have a 5 megawatt solar park facility,
We never got it.
and then put 500 feet all the way around it.
Yep.
You're up
Well,
to
the
almost
budget-
70 acres.
Jack did the math, like to put, if you had like a real square, simple piece of property, which of course there are none of those. And you put 500 foot setback all the way around, that alone, setback alone is 22 acres.
And
we
so,
only- we only
so,
need
so,
20
so let me,
acres for 5 megawatt.
Right, but it's
No, I know, but
23,
like,
you
but
got
we have
23
buffer.
acres
You
of
know, I
buffer.
know what you're saying. I know what you're
But
saying.
we built in a
And
minimum
so-
of 20 acres, and you can't even do the minimum with 20 acres because of the setbacks.
we hear you. We didn't have that information.
No,
We
correct.
didn't get it. So
Yep.
we had to go to the buffer.
copy of this?
That's fine, Tim, but that was kind of meaningless to me because,
You don't know what this is.
yeah, well, I kind of.
It does list out zones on
I
it.
would
Oh,
like,
that would
I
be
would like
good.
to
Yeah.
copy it, but.
I'll go make that.
If I can interrupt,
Yeah.
Kim, just 1 second. What's missing on the list is the map and lot numbers of these parcels. Because we can't get to where these actually physically are on the map by the description that we have right here.
Is there an evidence?
You can by the road, Jack.
Huh?
Yeah,
The road's
street-
listed there.
street
That's how I got to
How
John's.
how do you look on the tax map and see 48? Whatever. Yeah.
We were told that a map would be done where those lots would then be like
Yellow.
blocked out in yellow or
Well,
red or something like that.
And
I'll
basically,
ask, let me, yeah.
Yeah.
Let
the
me
zoning
ask,
map
let me
is right
find out.
outside of the, the town council office downstairs, it's right on the wall, a couple of them. And Amy said she could, just write on them, like pick out a few parcels that are a certain size so we have a good sense of what is what. And then sort of work our way through that map. I mean, I don't really know how else to do it. And I don't think anybody wants to sort of manipulate the process by having setbacks, eliminate properties. Like, I don't think that's the way to go. I think the way to go is to look at where properties are, decide if it's likely, could become solar, decide if we want it there or not, and then decide how to mitigate. No?
I just reversed it, Jack, right? So I looked up Junction Road. I wanted to see how big St. Pierre's was. Junction Road's on the tax map downstairs, on the zoning map.
That's an 80-acre
Right.
property, and it's
So-
in the middle, and it's 20 acres right in the middle of that property. Right? So,
That's how I got that.
That was the map that I did. They were just, okay, you can't do anything on 23 acres. What can you do something on? So I just picked out a 2 megawatt facility with 20 acres. And you need 83 acres with the 500 setback. So if we come back to something else, I threw out 75 feet. And so that, then you can start hearing it down so you have a reasonable lot size. You felt, or I felt, that 500 feet was all.
That was kind of a suggestion thrown out at the meeting.
Yeah.
And then we got back to the next meeting. The bold vote on it, send it over. So we didn't really have
Conversation.
a lot of conversation. I mean, we were there, and we had some, but we were kind of like, all right, take it back. Have a good time.
I think it's definitely safe to say, I'm looking at the council, that like, we feel like 500 is quite aggressive.
Wait a minute.
500 in my mind is ridiculous. It just, it's almost 2 football fields.
Yeah.
I mean,
And that's, as Mallory pointed out.
no one can visualize it. It's 2
High
football
and dry
fields.
land, no wetlands, no other things, no resource protection, shoreline, or anything like that that would come into play that would otherwise put further limitations on it. So we're on agreement with that. I'm fine. Pull up a map and say, okay, where is these places? I mean, just looking at it at our meeting on the 14th, we looked at R2A, R3, R4, R5. There might be a couple of tweeners closer into town, but that seemed just with a 30-second look at the map of the council chamber, former council chamber. It seemed like it could be a focus, Tim, for looking at the parcels that are perhaps beyond Wood Truck Road and not towards Avenue.
So
So where do you think in terms of the I understand at the end of the day, it's the council's decision. 75 feet really isn't a lot if you're in a residential area. And, 75 feet in, you can clearly see what's going on. So, if you want to back it up with some good screening, then I think, a combination of both would be good.
Well,
Where I come up with 75 feet, I think this room is about 50 feet. And with 75 feet, taking another 25 feet on top of that, you're gonna have room for at least a section, 3 deep in the middle of large trees. But what you're gonna have on each side is the opportunity for understory plants, all the shrub stuff, sumacs and the recipient, and all these other pioneer species that are looking for sunlight, and those will fill in both sides. That's just how, because they're all competing for sunlight. So I think just by, if you make it wider, it's just making those buckets further apart, you have open forest in between.
one other point on that, so I guess the question that I have is like, I don't really understand what shade management is.
Shading the panels.
Okay, because it says shade management areas are prohibited within the required setbacks. Is that,
But no, you can't, I think the setback, in order to prevent shade of the setback from coming down onto the panels.
So normally, right, the sun can't get in there, they'll cut the trees at an angle in order to allow the
oh,
sunlight
and that's
in.
shade management.
Right,
got
and
it.
so they don't want to allow that cutting to happen within the setback. The setback has to be totally tall trees, no cutting it. And then once you get past that, you can start cutting whatever you want. to
So
allow
depending on
sunlight.
the lot though, if we are putting 500-foot setback, then however much, the trees and the shade management, that's pushing it back even further.
You know,
right?
That's a developmental issue that they're
Yeah.
gonna have to get over, So if you want to maintain the integrity of your buffer, you have to have the shade management outside of that.
So you
Once they
cover-
go cutting, it'll be the CMP cut, just up the top of it.
You cover buffering in here though with all equipment such as solar panels, transformers, equipment used in the operation shall be buffered. Screened from adjacent roadways surrounding residential uses in regards for view and glare to minimize disruption. So it adds in here, I think this
This
is
is
Tannic,
Tanny, yeah.
that added in the evergreen trees. So it's in here that it has to be,
All direct views will be screened by 2
Yeah.
offset rows of evergreen plants.
it's already in the ordinance.
They're not putting hemlocks because they're all dying.
No, but it's 75 feet with trees in the middle, you're not gonna see it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean,
You might
even
fall
in the
on the
winter,
winter.
that's pretty dense. I think 500 is, I don't know why I got it in there,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
I think it was-
A shot in the dark. maybe. I don't know.
I take a parcel like Brad Jones's piece off of Harvey Cut Road, with a view from Cabot Hill looking towards Agamenticus. There's no amount of buffering that are gonna, if that goes to solar farm, that whole hillside would be, there's no way you can.
Right, we're all assuming it's a flat piece of land, but you're right, if it's on a hill or a valley, or it's all gonna, I mean, every piece of land's gonna be really different, so that's the problem.
So you all were kind of talking about like your thought process going into kind of like building out table A in terms of zones and stuff. And it sounds to me like the setbacks is sort of like a drive, an input to that, right?
It was kind of in lieu of, in my view, because we really weren't getting weren't really getting anywhere. We had to really hit it very hard on table A. And so I believe the thought process was, well, let's address from the setback and then we'll be self-regulating. So even if you want to say, hey, allow them everywhere, you want to go down to a 120-foot buffer or 100-foot buffer, that would then become self-regulating as well. In my view, part of the conversation was really making sure that they are effectively screened primarily from the residential area. That was really the issue. So it doesn't matter where they are if they're effectively screened.
It looks like Jeff has joined us.
And also, I mean, we'd like to find a way to do it. I mean, we don't want to say there's how many hundreds of properties on here, and, I mean, we cross off a bunch, right? Like the land trust and whatever, but the town owns, but, every person here could basically decide to do it if we come up with an ordinance, no matter how much we have. Just to make sure it doesn't happen. And I'm not entirely
Yeah,
sure
I
that,
mean, you know, in some of our, these are really commercial enterprises. One of the applications that we dealt with just at the last meeting had already changed hands to another corporation. And so these are corporations, these are huge entities coming in, conglomerates that buy up all these projects that come in. So, you know, if we're, who are we looking out for? You know, these are commercial money-making enterprises. You know, again, if we're not so concerned about the residential aspects, then that's where the buffer comes in. You know. So the more you go back, the more you come in, you know, they're not the prettiest thing.
I'm looking for 140-9. Definitions.
We never got to it.
Yeah, that's one of the things.
So, I'm missing it, but I think it's worth saying just in the workshop setting that what we're regulating here are essentially commercial solar operations. They could be proprietors, you know, property owners could run them, but, you know, I don't think we want to do anything that would discourage like what we have in the library. You know, solar array on the library roof, or if someone chose to put 20 panels on their roof, we don't want to discourage that homeowner type of application. We
No,
want to
we-
define it as
the
a,
definition definitely does not, yeah, it makes it very clear that those kind of projects aren't included.
so where is the definition? Is there a definition? We didn't do it. Oh, okay.
I think it was the start of it.
Well, it was a really like a one sentence.
We'll get
Okay,
there.
okay, so that's on the list.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, yeah.
Never got
I mean, it's a
And again,
solar,
so. That's what I'm saying, a lot of the stuff.
Okay, so Phil does, on his email, he offers a definition.
I mean, right away, you answer a
Commercial.
couple questions.
Commercial solar energy facility, okay,
Yeah.
so I'm fine with, you know, protecting the interests of the rooftop.
Yep.
Type deal.
So
Hey,
then,
Jeff, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
so then really the couple things that we just need to focus on are the setbacks and table A.
Yep.
So,
The combination thereof or not. So I think we're hearing the town council doesn't want 500. Okay. You want to throw out a number for us to consider that would then be generally acceptable, because I don't want to go back and honestly waste anybody's time.
Yeah.
If you tell us we're not going to take any less than 75, then.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Well, I thrown out 75, the incoming town planner threw out 50. Those are arbitrary numbers, those are just, you know, what makes sense to Jack or Amy or whoever, so. We have consensus, at least in the council part of the 75.
yeah, I mean, I would almost say, kind of listening to Hershey and Greg, kind of what you've said about residential use, I would almost be, maybe if you can find, say, 100, and that's coming back a lot from 500, but still it's like,
Some of our research, there was 100.
yeah.
It's just really being effectively screened. That
Yeah.
was our big
Yeah.
issue from the residential area. you
Yeah.
know? And then we did have conversation back to Hershey. We did have a brief conversation about the ability to limit the number of them. Because you don't want to be overrun by them, you know? I think we're dealing with two right now. We just gave, one is in, and the other we just gave an extension to.
When we Junction Road came in when I was in the
Yeah.
business done,
And
And
we
the-
sold.
right, MBD over by, the 91, 236 intersection of Marsh over there, they're right behind it off Old South Road, and apparently it's already cut down all its trees. So, we were just waiting on some information, we never got.
No, they asked for an extension because of supply chain and all that other kind of stuff.
Right, but they also said they've already heard from DEP and
Oh, yeah.
with Fish and Wildlife, but we had put conditions on the permit, so we ain't got that stuff from them, so I'm waiting for that. And then one was proposed on, the hill right behind Highland.
Right over
Right.
here, 900 is there.
Yeah, so, up from like Powder House Hill and that one up there, and it got withdrawn because it sounded like the town owns some utilities up there. I don't remember if it was water district.
But,
And
going
they
back
weren't
to-
going to help with an easement, and then they just blew it. And so it's right in the center of town. I don't know, but you're always gonna have, somebody doesn't want it there, so.
But we also don't think this should be regulated as a public utility.
Yes, it
Which is
needs to be
why
separate.
that needs to be a separate definition. There was some conversation, again, wasn't to be all end all. Because additional conversation on table A was keep it out of the R5.
No, that was your conversation.
Well, maybe, well, we had the conversation. I honestly don't remember who had it, but the R5 came up because public utilities are already not allowed in R5. But is it the appropriate place for it? For those that were following, the Bennett Lot Road was a big issue with development over there, so.
Well, and also, I mean, there's so many different ways to think about this, right? I mean, that we are preserving R5 as this rural area of our town, so why allow solar to get there? But, and it's not like anyone's gonna put it in Old Mill, right? There's a space for one over there, but there's a big wetland there that they put it in. So, it begs where are these sort of interstitial spaces within zones that you feel like you could have it? And
Yeah,
once
well,
again, it's property by property is the problem.
yeah, but you got part of the bigger issue that's brewing too is we're getting hit with a lot of new subdivision requests. And, Blackmore Road, on looking for an extension. There's another one looking to go in, one or two over on Great Hill. Belmarsh.
No,
Belmar.
Is there one in Belmar?
No,
No.
not Belmar. Yeah, I haven't seen it.
I asked about this. I think I'm confused.
We got that info? Okay, because we were told that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we haven't gotten anything as far as I'm aware.
good.
And so, you're gonna have these large developments going in some nice areas that are prime locations for a co-located solar array. And so we already have had at one of our meetings, a lot of residents from one of these proposed developments come out. And so imagine the solar array on top of this development. So
So,
we need to be, not much you can do about it, but you gotta
Yeah.
be thinking about that too.
well, and I'm hoping the comp plan catches up with us at some point. That the comp plan really lays out, what our plans in terms of sort of gross development are. Right? So, I mean, there's tension, right? We need more housing. We need more affordable housing, but we need more housing. It's gonna go somewhere. And I think the project that's off Route 4 is a great place to put it. Nothing else is gonna go there. It's that road into it is totally industrialized anyway. So, 27 units of housing is nothing to sneeze at. I mean,
That's not gonna be affordable housing.
no, it's not affordable, but
That's
we
gonna be
also,
minimum $400,000
right, but
walking the door.
also the cry for affordable housing to me is a bit of a red herring, right? It's for people who don't want any development. And they say, well, we just want affordable, but we don't have any ordinance that addresses that or makes us do affordable housing. Nobody in the town is spearheading any affordable housing. Right? We don't have a 10B like Massachusetts has, it says 10% of new rental housing has to be affordable. So, so
Haven't
that's,
read LD 2003 then.
well, I'm just hoping that, the comp plan is the place where these discussions should happen, right?
It is, but you give up on this area. Growing up here, it was affordable. It went away from affordable 15 years ago. It's not getting any better. Lebanon, 10 years ago was affordable. They're now where we are.
But we could actually, I mean, when I say affordable, I mean affordable low-income housing tax credit, like investment projects. Where, a nonprofit affordable housing developer comes in and develops housing that is regulated to 60% area median income or below. You have to make an effort to do it. It doesn't, the town has to be a partner in doing it. So we could have it, we just haven't had the will, right?
So anyway, at the end of the day, when we're talking solar farms,
Yes,
Yeah, I was gonna
There's
say,
back to
well,
solar
there's
farms.
there's a lot of, there's other developmental issues that are gonna be competing and could potentially be a larger issue. So if you want us to really, again, one way to consolidate or eliminate whatever language you want to use is to do the setback. The other approach is to do a setback in combination with saying where you can, which is table.
I wonder if there's something in between something that we're allowed to find? This is a question for Tammy, really, is are we allowed to, on a case-by-case basis, evaluate a project? Which I realize that sort of doesn't leave any room for developers to, you know,
We want to
approach
test that
this.
one in court.
Yeah. that
Well,
doesn't sound-
no, but Kittery, they went to court over the marijuana lottery. They prevailed, I believe they prevailed. And so this may be something you want to explore putting a number on,
With how many?
how many.
Oh, we did that with storefronts, technically. We did it.
No, we didn't, though. You
Well,
weren't allowed to say how
we
many.
did by putting them where we did and
Yeah.
the distance between them.
Well, and that's sort of what they're talking about.
Oh, no, I know where they're
Doing
going, and it's a good idea, because we did it without doing it, so we couldn't be accused of doing it.
So you can limit by the buffer size, by where you allow them. And so I think that really is the crux of what we need to figure out.
I think that's the direction to go.
This is like speaking for myself, I feel like we should have both, like we should for sure have some type of setback. But then also, because are you sort of saying like we could do both or one or the other?
I think you could do, again, you could go to the stream and have nothing but a buffer.
Yeah.
Okay, and now the buffer would protect all of the surrounding landowners from anything. What's that magic number? You said no to 500. So is it 200, right? That's one way to now say, okay, do we care if all the residential properties now are effectively screened? So if that's the case, let them go wherever they want to go. Or you could say, drop it to 100, and now let's say, no to B1, obviously, yes to R3 or R4 and R5.
Yeah.
In conjunction with an effective buffer, because, you're really in the residential area, but there's residential development everywhere. I think you understand where I'm going.
But I don't think the point is to use the buffer as a way to eliminate properties that are eligible. The point of the buffer is to have screening,
It-
Yeah.
and they have
Yeah.
good policies around where they go when they do go, and to make sure it doesn't upset the neighbors, which is always a crapshoot,
Yeah.
because you can have 100, once again, 100-foot buffer and be on a hill looking over a solar farm.
Yeah.
So I don't disagree with Hershey. I was actually more looking at it as the effective way to do it and restrict it because we hadn't gotten any other information.
Right,
So I didn't know what,
right.
absent that,
And
Absent that, it was a great shot in the dark.
that's
Yeah.
right.
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
I feel like if we did sort of a combination of setbacks to deal with like the screening, kind of like your neighboring property, like that type of issue. And then we think like logically about like where in town would we actually want these to be to drive like the table A thing. One, I feel like that's like very transparent and very cut and dry. Like, where is my property? Like, can I do this here? Can I not do this there? And it kind of using the setbacks to drive like where somebody can go, like feels. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's right.
no, I think they should be separate, but using table A is sort of a proof bludgeon.
Yeah.
Right, in that there are gonna be random properties all over every zone you look at. Some which will work great, and some which won't, in every zone, and that's really the problem.
No,
is-
that's not true. Because every zone will accommodate this. And we have to be outside, if there's a line, the CMPs. Anything to the west of CMP it's not R3.
It's fair game.
No, it isn't, it's all small. It's all these little small lots.
Right,
And it's in this isthmus of R3 that goes up into here and around. And so it's,
but for all the other zones in town, right? Whether it's R5 or R4 or the industrial zone, for
Yeah.
example, there's some properties that are a few acres and some that are hundreds. And, you just sort of say you need this buffer and you need everything else, that means every property over, 40 acres to put a solar farm in all over town. I mean, obviously not, for extents, but, if these are a list of properties that are, assuming 20 acres is too small, but once you get on to this page, all of these could have a solar farm. With, a few exceptions, right? Not state of Maine property and not Great Lakes Land, regional land trust.
Well, but we also have the map, so we have the minimum lot area, which right now is 20 acres, and maximum wattage is 5 megawatts, which would be 50 acres. So we're essentially capping the amount of property that could be used to
See,
house
we were-
solar farms.
Okay, so we were told 5 megawatts fits on 23 acres.
Right.
5 megawatts.
Yep, on 23 acres. That was Junction Road.
And right, it was right, exactly. We looked at that project.
No, the 500%.
It would work with septic. No, but that's a national project moving forward.
And They used,
Junction Road.
they used 23 acres to put in 5 megawatts, right? But they also had an 80-acre property to put it in the middle of.
That doesn't make sense because a lot of going through this is that you need 10 acres for 1 megawatt.
And sorry, you guys heard 5
You-
megawatts for
that's-
23 acres?
I'm looking at now. And I think. the
So a
MEP
1 megawatt solar field is 2.5 acres.
What's that?
A 1 megawatt solar field is 2.5 acres.
Yeah.
So
There's so many variables here.
you're talking what, 12 and a half, 13 acres technically.
That's where we came up with it.
produce 1 megawatt.
So we have a difference between the two.
Well,
No.
and that's basically everything. I'm doing.
We're getting like all kinds of conflicting information.
Of course we are, because we're all on Google. If we went to Facebook, it would be true. but That's on Facebook.
Be right, yes, right.
Sorry. We're in a meeting for my apologize.
Tim, do you know, like, is there somebody that we could like lean on through Tammy somehow to,
I don't know, but I'll reach out and ask.
yeah, just to kind of get like a definitive number for like,
And I'll also reach out and ask, somebody's gonna know. the answer to this.
So,
Yeah.
so Tim, what, I think there's one going in right up on Route 4 North Berwick. Yeah.
Big number of walls too.
Give Wayne a call, see if he's got any info on that.
There's 3 in Sanford, there's another one.
Sanford's
going
got
in.
a big one. I could.
They got a new one right on Route 4.
You know,
Yeah.
if you want a solar expert, John Brannigan works in the industry. And we're not gonna talk about it, I'm sure it's nice guy.
I think you're going down the right path today. I think if you guys had more time, you were going down the right path.
yeah, I think
That's
so
the
too.
road we're going down.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's getting really, really confusing. And if we had a, like towards anybody, because no one really knows
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff. Kind of making it up as we go along. If we had someone that could help us do more of the preparation and the research for us, so we had something to talk about. That was really
That's what Tammy's,
Which,
Yeah.
yes, which we're very excited about.
that's what Tammy's gonna be doing.
Right.
What, would it be helpful? I don't want you folks waste your time. I'm sitting there listening, and Greg's right, you have missing a lot, I think you're missing some key components that you need to make some solid decisions with. So would it be worth it? Step back tonight, and then let me get Tammy dug into this, let me work with her. And your next meeting comes up with next week, July 1st. July 6th. So put this back on your agenda for July 6th.
And Tim, can you, I guess I feel like there are conditions that might exist that to me should eliminate the possibility of a solar array in a certain place. And I don't know how to describe it any better, which is why this idea of like looking at each property seems important.
Let me ask you a question. So have we done other solar ordinances, looked at them?
Dave has pilfered from other towns.
Have you been given ordinances to look at? Okay, let me get to Tammy. To me, that's the missing, one of the missing pieces. Wouldn't it make sense if you had something, you could, not somebody else over it, you look at it and see if what you think?
I think the problem is the ordinance doesn't really address what we're trying to do. And the problem is,
I think what Hershey's trying to say is, a 5 megawatt facility in a sparsely populated area is not going to be as perhaps impactful as a 5 megawatt facility in a densely populated area.
Exactly, right.
And so therefore, can we hear it, again, initially I say, well, DPR 5 would be set up perfectly for that. But that's probably not going to jive with the comp plan. I don't know.
well,
See,
or-
you don't want it on Super Sands where he's making the field.
Yeah, the hate, right, yeah.
right, but there's all sorts of, think about it, like,
Yeah.
okay, here's this huge property next to the town forest. So now when you walk to the town forest and you go over a rise on a hill, you see this huge solar array. We don't want that. But that would qualify if we just used,
But it's just like everything else we've done in town. Everybody wanted a new police station, but nobody wanted it in their backyard. You gotta have it. And if you're walking through the town forest and it's there, I agree with you. I live in the woods. I don't want to see one, but I'm gonna, because that's the way it's moving.
Well,
So then the question becomes though, along that same lines, do you want to be looking at a certain number of these things? When you hit 5, you're done.
Yes,
You know?
I don't want 40 in
I don't-
that home.
I
Right,
don't,
so I
but
think
I don't think we're legally allowed to limit the number.
So
You
I say
absolutely
we,
can limit the number.
I think it would be, I think Tim's suggestion of getting with Polatanian, she'll get some draft ordinances for you to take a look at. I think we need to figure out this X megawatts per Y acres, whatever that looks like. I think that's an input that you all need. You have some direction from us on the 100-foot setback, then I think everybody's generally in agreement about that. And then I think Tammy will be a great person to talk to Hershey about like what you're talking about, like, and give us, like, she'll be very frank with you about like what is doable, what's not.
Well, just as brought up Freeport's ordinance, and in their ordinance, one of the things that they identify different setbacks, different requirements for different zones within their town. And I'm wondering, what you're mentioning, that's what kicked into my head instantly is, well, you're right. Maybe in the R3 zone, for some reason, it's different than what you would do in the R2 zone. I don't know the zone that well enough to tell you. Have we done, maybe that's a better answer, and the answer to do that is to,
But it's, and once again, not that that isn't significant, but it's not only about like screening it from neighbors. A lot of it is, you might be in a watershed area. You might,
Right.
it might be a quarter for a herd of deer we've had for 40 years here. It might
Right.
be, the Blandings turtle is gonna be, I mean,
Right.
you know, there's all sorts of other mitigating factors besides, am I gonna be able to see it or not? And that's sort of partly what I'm worried about and why it's almost as if I want to review each one on a case by case basis, and we can't do that. That's spot zoning. But, you know, there has to be some way to, you know, sort of compromise. and
right, somebody else has figured this out already, right? We didn't, you know, the best thing we have in municipal government, is plagiarization, so.
I think we actually narrowed down a lot tonight. We have the definition.
Yep.
Phil
And bonding.
cleared that up. We cleared up the other bonding issue. It really is down to the setback and where. So I think if we as the planning board, probably won't happen on the 6th. But at the next meeting, maybe we could be a half an hour early.
Where,
Have a
where,
workshop.
where are we able to limit the number?
I
If we're
I
not,
think.
then I'm all for totally being incredibly restrictive on this.
The thing is, we're running, if we gotta do public hearings on this, right, and then get any revisions and get back to a meeting, we're starting to run out of time if we're just going to the September 23rd deadline. So I think that may have been Amy's catalyst.
So can we get the ending date? And do kind of a reverse calendar work back as to when.
I don't have it with me, but
Oh, I know.
I will get it.
And then we'd like 3 months, and you guys can have a week, okay? So
Well, because you guys have to get a public hearing in, we have to get a public hearing in.
we can have a joint public hearing.
No, not on this one.
Yeah.
On this one.
We talked about that and it would be cleaner.
But can I, you know, it's my understanding that we can hold a public hearing. We can throw out a draft ordinance. It doesn't have to be the final word.
Correct.
So we can have a public hearing whenever we want to. Get that out of the way.
You guys were,
But you'll have, the council will have to have a final, for them, they have to have the final approved, what's gonna be voted
Right.
on, or what they're gonna vote on,
So
what they're gonna make
Right.
law.
So what you need to do for us then, Tim, is tell us on that calendar, what day the council needs it. So that you can then do your process and have your public hearing and then your vote.
so you meet twice a month, right?
Yeah.
So realistically, and I'm just spitballing this, you'll give me actual, but if we gave until their first meeting in August to be complete, that'd give you 3 total meetings. Then you
Well, the
have,
first meeting in July is going to be useless.
so that would give you 2 plus a public hearing.
Unless someone can talk to Tammy.
If Tammy can really drill down on this and understand like what our, you know, our concerns are, I think they're pretty clear, right? And we'll be ready to go. in a couple of weeks.
So I think we're down to the buffer issue in what zones, right?
Yeah.
And then I think we should pull in that Freeport. I like that different requirement for the zones. I think that's something to absolutely look at. And then I also think that we need to get an idea, and I do believe that we can put a limitation on the number. And that would solve a lot of problems.
I'll reach out to legal and ask Bill that. But I really think your point's very, very well taken, Hirsch. I really think there's gotta be some language in there that allows you, the planning board, when this project put in front of you, to look at all aspects of it, not just the buffer zone, not just the clear zone, the shade area. It's gotta be, you gotta be able to look at all the variables, I think.
Right, and usually, the code is always about what you can't do, right? You can't think of everything.
Right.
So,
So let me ask Tammy that. Let me get this back to Tammy tomorrow as soon as I can. Mallory's gonna send me that stuff. I'll work the calendar back, get that to the council. Let me see if I can get some information for you guys for the 6th and have, Dan will be on board by then the 6th. We'll put this back on your agenda for the 6th. Is that okay with you? Then we can, you guys can start having that discussion on the 6th with whatever information Tammy get
Yeah,
back.
and if you can front load us with all that information.
Yeah.
I think we can absolutely start to plow through it. And probably too late to do the 6th. We might be able to meet earlier if the board wants to on the second meeting in July.
Who's the vice chair of the planning board?
we eliminated that position.
Secretary.
Oh, secretary.
You guys are gonna,
Oh, wait, I think I'm.
All right, well, whoever the vice chair will have to come in and meet with Tammy on it. She'll have all the information. But I'm sure want to meet with the vice chair to get them up to speed to run through for the meeting on July 6th.
Well, yeah, but I think it's important enough that I think the whole entire board needs to hear that.
Oh, no, I'll get it out to you, but I just, she's gonna wanna meet with somebody. All right, let me work on that for you guys. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
One other thing. Planning board's meeting on July 6th, the 20th, August 3rd, and August 17th. I believe that the planning board needs to have the public hearing at least by August 17th.
So what we'll do is I think we have a three-quarter draft. We'll talk. And what we'll do.
Yeah,
is
because
we'll
by the
have a
last-
public hearing on the 20th or the 3rd.
I think we need 2 weeks.
Think about the last meeting, we need 10 days for public hearing.
7 days, 10 days.
We were-
We were talking about extending.
But
This is the first.
Yeah, so
we
You
need
can't
that
have the first one.
in order for us to get, once you get the invoice,
I thought we
it's a
extended it.
drafting time. And I think you need a public.
I think it was,
I think we're gonna.
February.
it was in February.
Jeff,
we were all-
do you happen to remember, is this an extension of our moratorium?
Yes.
for
Yes,
solar?
it's-
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So the drop dead date is.
That's what I get from you.
Sorry, we were busy with that other thing.
So
Yeah.
what I was just talking to Jack about is when we convene in July, we should probably be moving to have a public hearing either July 20th or August 3rd at the latest, so to gather the public comment. And so that we can do the final draft by the 17th in time for you to go through your process and have your public hearing. But I need Tim, you
Yeah,
gotta get us the
Yeah.
data for the end date. when you
Yeah.
have to Have your public hearing.
So hypothetically, looking at what I know for, I believe it's 10 days for a public hearing for the board to advertise. But doing it that way, if we did it that way, it has to be on the council, it has to be on the council's agenda, the second meeting in August, which would be the 23rd. You guys would then have to say, you're gonna have to post a public hearing so that you could put it back on your agenda on the 13th.
of September, so,
to get
yeah,
it to the 23rd.
Yeah.
So let me look at, get that, I'll punch that out to everybody as soon as I get that, hopefully tomorrow.
yeah, okay. So some of the outstanding questions that I have for Tammy, I'm just ready to come to you.
Yeah.
How many megawatts per acre? Can we
Well,
limit
we
the
have to
number of
have a
solar
public
farms on this?
Yeah.
But it's
So
like
that's been a
pulling
good
together other
There's some
ordinances
things
made
that-
in this timeline and stuff.
Why don't you have it on
Well,
the-
I think we could have it on the 20th. I think we have enough. We're
Yes,
gonna,
I agree.
people aren't gonna look at all this. They're gonna come out and say, what's our,
I don't know if I can do
you
that.
know.
No, I
Very
just-
few
I
are
just
gonna
didn't
say,
wanna have
what's
it be
the
at the end of the-
23.5 opposed to 22.
Okay.
Okay,
What
so,
we'll try to do as the planning board
Yeah.
is if there's enough time, we'll schedule our public hearing on July 20th. So that way we can have time to solicit the feedback, if any.
And
And
we'll
that
just,
gives us 2 more meetings essentially, to get it to you by the 17th.
and we'll have Barbara confirm that. time.
Yeah, I'll get that all confirmed this week and I'll get that out to everybody next couple days.
Now, town council, our second meeting in September is the 27th.
Yep.
And I think we have consensus that we're late on that, so either, if we get it on for our meeting on August 23rd, we would need to actually pre-post the public hearing like on August 9th, August 9th. And you need to have a finished product by our first meeting in September, which is the 13th.
Yeah, so we need to be able to have on our agenda for September 14th, like us taking action on the ordinance. So we need to basically back out from September 14th as our meeting before the
Actually, it's
ordinance.
the 13th.
Tim,
Or, yeah, start 13th.
what we really need to know is what day do you need a drop dead from the planning board?
I will get that
And then
for you.
we will back out from there.
Yeah.
It will most likely be a combination of these days.
Barbara's pulled this together for us before for previous moratoriums, like very black and white of like, council needs to do their public hearing no earlier, or sorry, no later than this public hearing. We'll get, we don't need to talk about it more. We'll get the information from
So
Barbara.
I'll get that out to you. I'll get that out to you this week.
Yeah,
And I'll get to Tammy tomorrow and see what she can start, corralling for information. I'll ask her to get a couple ordinances so that you guys can have something to look at. You guys should have had those in your hands.
So, I just want to make sure everyone's in agreement with, I'm just keeping track of the things that we're gonna send it to him to have the staff take care of. How many megawatts per acre? We need to know that. Can we limit the number of solar farms in town is a question. Looking at other ordinances in Maine, getting those to you guys, the timeline stuff, and the map of the 20+ acre parcels in town is TBD. We're not sure if we can do that, but
I'd actually, my preference would be to see if Tammy could actually go a step further and say, okay, it's one thing to say at a meeting or a couple days before, hey, here's Freeport. That's delaying time.
yeah, to get it to you guys sooner.
Well, right, but if there's any way she could look at the Freeport and say, okay, based on her general knowledge, I don't know how much she knows of South Florida.
She said she's done 3 solar farms.
Okay,
So,
okay, and so,
or 3 solar farms.
yeah, I would be really interested to see, taking that just off the top of my head, Jeff, you said Freeport had like different requirements in each zone. I'd like to see just a stab at what it looks like in South Florida. Yeah, and at least we have something to react to, and not, then we don't have to say at the end of the meeting, hey, go do it. Now we're behind in the meeting.
Greg, here's what, under their definition, solar farm large or larger solar farm, a solar energy generation system that may be roof or ground mounted, preliminary generates electricity to the energy grid for off-site consumption. And if it is ground mounted, has a solar array development area that is 87,120 square feet, 2 acres, or greater, but less than 10 acres, except for in the commercial 1 C1 district, where the solar array development area may be 87,120 square feet, 2 acres or greater, or less than 15 acres. So they added that in. So what they did is, in one area, they're saying you can only do this side. If you go to this zone, you can do this.
So I'd say in South Berwick, it's almost going to be the reverse.
Correct.
Because there's not a lot of, well, there is potential out in the industrial, but
But I see what they did. They limited their size. What they limited, in smaller, apparently smaller districts, limited their size going out
Right,
to
but
get bigger.
we're not talking about. So that could be, for instance, something that drives a property, right? But CMP only accepts a certain size, I think, right? Isn't the point that they have to be? Not for them, there's some that, for these solar farms, there's a reason they're 5 megawatts. Like they can't be more than that, and that's the most lucrative way to do
but
it.
remember,
They went down to
NBD went back to 2,
two.
and so now they're working with CNP on this study to connect. So I think it can we could get more
That's-
information.
That's another, like, a lot of this is driven by regulations around CMP and also
Right.
what's financially feasible for
But
a
that locks
company.
out those properties. You don't have to worry about it. If you say in this area, you can only do 2 megawatts, and it can't connect to the
Well,
CMP
I've
grid,
only
you
assumed,
effectively locked out those properties, so
I-
that's a win.
I've been assuming that you had to do 5 megawatts, because that seemed to be all the ones that were coming in, were all 5 megawatts until now.
That's a profitable solar field.
So at the end of the last meeting, I think. Yes, I was saying, well, wait a minute, missing.
We're
It
not-
was
we don't
a
have
minimum
enough.
of 5.
We're talking second.
Now they're proposing
I enjoy
2.
it. It's like a cheap fare, right? I've been testing, nothing making fix.
Okay, that's another thing we're gonna kind of get
Right.
another piece of information we're gonna try to
Which
get.
could
is
also, don't forget, change.
We can't. prove that. So how many, like, for, you guys are kind of looking for like, how many megawatts do you need to have in your farm in order to be able to like, tap into CMP or whatever?
Well, any small person like us could put one on our roof
Yeah.
and net meter, right?
Yeah.
That's legal in Maine.
Yeah.
We are actually thinking of doing it, but we're talking about these big commercial ones.
Yeah.
Right,
And the
but-
question is, what size are those then?
But, and the definition of what those are, I think
Right.
that's gonna come into, we need to look at somebody else's ordinance and see how they're defining it.
And I think what we learned now, putting 2 and 2 together at the last meeting, NBD went from 5 down to 2. I think it was being driven by the supply chain, one. Remember, they didn't have any of the parts, that's why they asked for the year extension. That's the thing, and then it changes hands to another corporation, then they
Yeah.
start.
Who knows what?
We'll try to get some information.
Question here, who's maintaining the document now?
Amy-
Tammy,
No, wow.
Tammy will be maintaining this.
That's a good question.
Tammy and Amy will be.
Yeah,
Okay,
Tammy
so-
and Amy.
We can definitely start with it.
Right, because I have 3 here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's what it's about.
I don't know, I downloaded it, and I stick it up on.
Yeah,
Okay,
will
so
be, part of Tammy's thing, is keep the board organized, keep your documents up to date,
Great.
and she'll have, so when she presents, she'll present to you the most updated one, you'll have that in your queue.
So when we're looking at ordinances with multiple pages, you tell her to put a footer in. So that footer carries through on every page, not
Just a
just the page
revision.
number, but like the addition, like whatever the date is. Because that way, if I'm dealing with 3, I know what one goes with what.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't know what one goes with what. just with my own file.
I'll explain to her, yeah, that's why we brought her up.
I think she's gonna be. It could be quite permanent.
Very.
Okay. Anything else, any other like outstanding questions that we have? I think our plan sounds good to. Sorry for calling this workshop. I think it's been productive, but sorry for the confusion. I think you guys have what you need. We're gonna get the rest of what you need. I think we're
Probably should have done this a month ago.
probably.
That's all
That's all
right.
right.
It's all good, it's all
We're
gonna
working
get done.
together.
Jeff, anything from you?
No, that's great.
All right. Good. I will send this to you in a second, Tim.
All right, thank you.
Have a good one, guys.
Thank you.
You getting that?